Thank you, Filippo. So I'm here to be slightly kind of provocative in a positive way. I think CAPS and the civic technologies movement is absolutely essential. And it's probably more essential than actually what and how we're discussing it. In a sense, CAPS and the civic technologies movement is essential for democracy. It is essential for a democratic economy. And largely, I would argue that most of the stuff that we've been discussing has largely been built in old corporate structures. It's built on Facebook and Google data. It's built on actually old school venture capital. It's built on largely old school institutions. Very little of it, with notable exceptions like Arduino and a few others, is actually European. And that's a real problem. That's a genuine problem. We are way behind what we need to be. And why is that important? Because I think Europe has a unique opportunity to actually advance democratic technologies. And democratic technologies are not just technologies, as was being alluded to earlier. It is actually the democratic organization of people. But it starts from the platforms and the institutions we build. I think, for me, we were having a very good conversation with Roger yesterday evening, and I was saying, well, I don't think it needs to be a £70 million movement, it needs to be a £1 billion investment. It needs to be a radical investment into building democratic technologies. Unless we do, we are going to see the structural monopolization of actually much of what we talk about. And the monopolization of platforms means effectively the structural inequality of much of what we talk about. We're seeing growth of it in structural inequality. Why? Because we're shifting towards a platform economy. What CAPS offers is actually building an alternative infrastructure for that. We're not doing that. I think the field requires institution building. The wiki progress work that's been talked about requires to be taken on. I think it requires new types of funds. Venture capital funds don't work in this arena. We haven't really talked about accelerators that actually have the right infrastructure, the right ethics to advance these technologies. What do they look like? Too much of what we were discussing yesterday was locked up in universities as nice ideas. Ideas, not innovations. We need field laboratories operating in the ground, changing everyday reality. This cannot be done in isolation or in ivory towers. I think, for me, Europe is uniquely placed to do this. There is probably no other nation and group of nations that is able to effectively advance the democratic cause right now as Europe is placed. We have the deep institutional infrastructures for democracy, and we need to build on them and revolutionize our technological base. And if we grow this, it affects people, organizations like science. Open science is a big radical movement in the US and growing all the way around. We've recently talked to David Cameron. I'll mention a name that should not be mentioned perhaps here, but he just recently announced the big issue around antibiotics and the demise of antibiotics. A huge amount of likely deaths and risks to actually civilization as we have it. That's not going to be solved in the classic corporate model. It will require the fusion of data that exists in health services, citizen advancement, as well as actually science done in a radical different way. So for me, my big call and my big agitation would be, I think Europe needs to take a structural lead. I mean a structural lead in the CAPS agenda and advance this as a systemic process. I'm grateful it's happening, but I think we need a step change in growing it.
Thank you.